Hylics 2 is one of those video games that makes me think about video games as a whole. And maybe some of the coolest games I've played are ones that cause me to reflect and understand these creative projects in that light. A world of infinite colors, and now I've yet again have seen a new shade, a new perspective on a piece that I find humbling. Hylics 2 made me feel lonely, which is different from actually being lonely, which is normal for me. It reminded me that I'm just an observer, sitting on a cliff and watching the people who exist interact with one another. Am I real? Maybe nothing is. Maybe being real isn't real. It reminded me that despite everything, there will always be people and games that I can never understand. Hylics 2 is my ultimate enemy, but maybe in some ways, my ultimate teacher. All this to say, I did not like Hylics 2. I enjoyed Hylics 1 more, but it's through this opinion on the game that has actually given me the ability to find value that I may not have potentially found without it. Perhaps after my experience with Hylics 1, I should not act as if this potentially expected outcome was actually unexpected. Should I have expected to have my expectations expected? I'm sorry I wrote that sentence in the script, and I'm sorry that I'm now saying it, and now putting it in the video. I had 3 chances to stop that, and here we are. This video isn't going to be like the Hylics 1 video, where I went through the events of the game and giving my thoughts on everything. Instead, it's going to be me just talking about the game and the aspects of it that I found interesting. I think it does things that very few games have done, and so many games wishes it could do. And the fact that I can see people who think the complete opposite on how I feel on it, makes me reflect upon just how big this world is. But, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hylics 2 was released in June of 2020 by Mason Lindroth once more, but this time with musical help by Chuck Salamone. I'll get into the music in a bit from now. The game involves the plot of Gibby, the defeated villain of the first game, not being fully beaten, now with a group of people attempting to resurrect him so he can rule the world once more. Which means Wayne's gotta gather his friends once again to stop all this from happening. Hylics 2 wasn't made in RPG Maker, unlike the first one, which was. I'm sure most YouTubers looking at this game would say some crap like, "Oh, this game has freed itself from the terrible burdens of RPG Maker, so it's automatically better in every way." And I don't know, it's so tiring to see games labeled as RPG Maker games, and people always acting so weird about them. It's not a genre. This game was made in Unity. Does that make it better? Is Unity more prestigious? Well, wait till I tell these people about RPG Maker Unite. Straight up Unity RPG Maker? Is that a blight upon the gaming world? Well, gamer, believe it or not every game needs to be made in its own in-house engine to be good and loved by many. But I can admit that the change of engine led to more gameplay styles. There are things here that would not be capable in RPG Maker. Case in point, this game mixes RPG battles we're used to with isometric 3D platforming. I don't know if I'd really call this game a 3D platformer. I see this more as just a new way to explore areas. Saying this game is a 3D platformer is like saying Doom is a 3D platformer, or I guess Hexen, but I don't think anyone's gonna get that one. As in, even though the player can jump and move around, it feels more like an RPG with instances of 3D platforming, but it's not the focus. I mean, I guess I'm not really sure what is the focus when it comes to this game. I was kind of worried about the soundtrack this time around, not being entirely composed by Mason Lindroth himself. Y'all assured me the music was flappy, and well, yeah. This game doesn't evoke the same feelings as it did with Hylics 1. There is no track like Chill. But it gives a different mood that I like just as well. Despite what I said, it sounds like the music I'd hear in a sequel to Hylics. Some of my favorite tracks have to be the ending song Finale, the world map theme World, and the boss music is all very excellent. Like, the song titled That's a Big Stick is such a cool take on a boss song. It's not some super intense track like y'all would expect from a boss music in a game, though it still has its moments, but it also still has that chill psychedelic rock for fighting. It's such a great song. This is a pretty chill soundtrack. Like, I think it had some sort of effect on me, because I ended up falling asleep during every session I had with this game. So I'm just randomly going through footage where I just have an hour or so of the characters just standing around. Like, I hear the world map theme, and I'm like, oh snap, bedtime already? This jam hitting different. And I'm like slumped on the floor, which isn't an insult at this game. I've honestly been falling asleep for a lot of the games I've been recently playing, always having to scroll through characters just standing around for an hour, which annoys editor me a lot, trust me. I always wake up like, god dang it, I just wasted a lot of space on dead footage. This is all off topic. What I'm trying to say is check out Moon Age Lobotomy. It's a musical expansion to Hylics 2 by Chuck Salamone, and I enjoyed listening to it while writing this script. Like, I think this is the best music in Hylics 2. And it's not even in the game. Now that's what I call a reoccurring trend. Seriously, check it. Somsnosis' theme is incredible. And I do like that each of the 4 characters get their own theme. Always thought music could reflect and add more detail to a character in its own unique way. It's all part of the colors of the painting. I think much like the first game, the most standout aspect of Hylics 2 is indeed the visuals. Being able to explore these areas in 3D now gives such a fresh enjoyment for me. I'm not just walking around a picture by Mason, I'm climbing around on it. The existence of 3D space gives so much more depth to these areas for me. It doesn't feel like I'm just walking on an overlapped image. It's like I've Super Mario 64 jumped into a work of art by Mason, and that rules. The visuals really did blow me back, like just seeing shadows and the like. I know, maybe I'm simple to please. It's nice to play a 3D game with such bright colors and world, even if there's kind of a downside in the form that some of these areas were kind of an eyesore. Like, it actually hurt to look at some points, or at least after a while. Not to discuss too deeply into a later topic of this video, but I see so many people comment on these visuals, calling them weird and trippy, drugs and all that. And I don't know. I think it's kind of sad that there's a societal point that we have to call anything that's colorful and creative on drugs. Like, shoot, something is creative?
Must be on drugs.
Maybe that's part of a greater societal issue of negative labeling towards anything that strives to be unique. To stand quivering in the line of dull normality, saluting to made-up beings of fear that dictate our actions. But that might just be me looking a little bit too deep. I like that the player can choose an alternate outfit for Wayne, being this shovel-like look. My favorite thing is the idle animation of it blowing in the wind. I can get some great shots standing near water and high up. Adding wind to the costume does so much for immersing myself in this world. Though interestingly enough, this outfit was to represent a scrapped character. I should have looked up how to pronounce this. Decrez? Who's originally going to be the main character of Hylics 2. I think it was probably a good idea to keep it as Wayne. These 4 characters, despite not having much for character or personality, mean a lot to people, in ways that I still can't really understand. Listening to their themes is probably the most I got to appreciating them individually. Appearance-wise, Didolsman and Somsnosa are pretty similar from the first game. I mean, everything is a lot clearer. Hylics 1 could look pretty crusty with its visuals at points. Could be kind of hard to understand some of the character designs that they were going for. And it's just a lot more clear in Hylics 2, just look at the comparison. Pangorma, however, got a new look. This fuzzy blue body and no longer rocking that helmet with the goofy face on it. Now being a more traditional knight helmet, with Mason saying this is the same Pangorma, he's just wearing a new helmet. I like both, but he definitely looks a lot cooler in Hylics 2. Wow, speaking of which, the enemy battle animations in this game rules so hard, and seeing how they were made as well, the motions and movements behind them are awesome. This is true creative stuff. Same with the cutscenes. Every time something moves in this game, it's an absolute joy to my eyes. I really like the visuals of the ending cutscene. Like, shoot, I kinda wish Mason would like make a movie or something. I like how in battles when enemies die and explode into flesh, the flesh slowly leaves the screen, scrolling away. It makes me feel like we're always moving forward in these fights, as if we're on some strange scrolling arena. And the camera change when flying around in the aircraft, and seeing the islands we've walked around in a new perspective. I don't know if this is spoiling, but I'm kinda under the mindset that everyone has already played this game. I guess this all leads to what I want to talk about with this video. The thing that Hylics 2 did in a unique way that not many games do, but so many games try. Being able to create a truly immersive alien world. One of the big areas the player goes to is this town called New Modal. It's likely thanks to the visuals of Lindroth's work, but this is the first time in a game I've ever been in an area that truly felt like it was from another world. When we explore most virtual worlds in games, we have the ability to associate structures and concepts with familiar ones from our own worlds and lives. Like, oh, this is the bathroom, this is like the restaurant, and here's the hospital. There's a certain way things like that are visualized. I remember hearing about a study on how people who play a lot of video games can navigate around structures they've never been in, knowing where things are all placed despite it being their first time in that place. I feel like a lot of games that attempt to create alien worlds still utilize and reference the structures that we're familiar with. Like, oh, okay, this is just Earth, but now the grass is purple. And maybe it does make sense that most societies, even alien, would evolve to the point of using buildings as homes. But there could still be so much more specific stuff to their races and the planet itself. But something like Hylics 2 truly convinces me that I am in a unique world like no other. I can't cling to any familiarity from my world. I'm alone and scared in a place that doesn't make sense to me. These tube openings, holes leading to these potential cave-like areas. I can only try to use my faulty skills here from understanding my world to make sense of things. This is a mine, this green stuff? I guess it could be grass maybe? I'm not sure. It's like in this foreign world, I'm once again having to build up new navigational skills, identifying structures and how places work, which has to be one of the best ways to get a player to focus on understanding the world and how it's built. This isn't just a place I've been to but with a different coat of paint or buildings that are slightly off shape from what I'm used to. I need to immerse myself in the world and culture if I want to understand where I am. I need to become a part of this world. And if relearning what I know all about this isn't the best way to convey an alien world different from ours, then I don't know what could be. Even hours later of revisiting this town, I always ended up getting lost. I could never commit this map to memory. I just wander around, a confused foreigner. I was the alien. In the end, I wasn't able to commit any areas and maps in this game to memory. I don't really remember what anything in this game looks like. It was just a colorful blob. Layouts, areas, enemies. It's all a blur. And while some of it may be my memory issues, I think I was just completely incapable of understanding this world. And maybe there's an irony that this world is so memorable to me because I can't remember it. Even Hylics 1, there's still some screens and areas I can recall. But here, I can't really think of anything. Completely blanked. Which I guess kind of scares me in a way that I'm not sure that I understand. Maybe how I remember and experience things isn't something I can ever explain to others. It's like driving a car down a road, and suddenly a wall shows up on the horizon, and then the walls surround me, and I just enter this complete blank state where I can't recall anything. The car gets stuck. I don't know. This is one of the biggest takeaways playing Hylics 2. What it did to me that I can't say any other game has. And I find that intriguing. I'd like to say this game made me understand something about myself I didn't know, but I don't know what that is. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. This game has a bit more of a plot this time around. Like, randomized dialogue is basically gone from the game, which if y'all remember was a pretty controversial choice with the original game, and that makes sense. I feel like something such as that could only be done once, right? And it's not like Hylux 1 was defined by that choice. It really was just a random choice amongst everything else. Just one of many creative decisions that game was full of. But Hylux managed to convey directions without needing dialogue, encouraging the player to look at the art and let it be our guide into the world. Which is funny, considering I got lost quite a bit in Hylux 2. There's still a bit of that design of looking at the area and following trails, but quite a couple of times I was pretty stumped, and some of the bigger areas could be pretty overwhelming. There were cool parts to it though. While Hylux 1 guided us, Hylux 2 asks us to figure things out. Like at one point the player needs to get into this area that's currently shielded off with a barrier, but the game doesn't say how to do this, it just says get rid of the barrier. However, the player can see that there's a yellow object being transmitted to this shield, and they can follow these shots at the source where they need to go, and that's pretty cool. But, I don't know. I feel like even with the dialogue being limited, just its existence and seeking on an easier to understand story makes it feel somewhat lesser than Hylux 1. I guess it's ironic that by trying to add more story, plot, dialogue, makes it feel like it has less of a story than Hylux 1. Hylics' lack of story made it feel bigger. It made me wonder the meaning of it and how I can interpret it that. I didn't get any of those feelings with Hylux 2, even if the meaning may still be there. It just feels like a simple stop the bad guy's minions from resurrecting him plot, though the explanation for the characters in Hylux 1's random dialogue was pretty cute. Maybe I'm missing something here, but I just don't feel as encouraged to go out and fail at understanding nauticism with Hylux 2 like I did with Hylux 1. It felt kinda empty to me, and I guess that could just be a me problem. Speaking of problems, perhaps now I should properly go into gameplay, but I don't know if I should. Whatever, let's see what happens. Let's start with the overworld. The player can move around in 3D space, both walking and running. There's a jump button, which when held will allow the player to slowly glide. Also a roll button, which I'm not sure if rolling does much. It felt like roll jumping may have given me more distance, but I'm not sure. It's not Donkey Kong, but it did look cool. It is pretty fun to move and run around in this game, which I think is pretty important for 3D platformers, or at least games with 3D movement in them. The highlight has to be the air dash the player gets early on. There's a pretty generous time limit on it, and the player can really speed around maps with it. Maybe a bit too much for the player's own good. I often found myself boosting across maps having no clue where to go. The freedom of movement means that I can approach maps in any direction, making understanding the intended path for the player a little hard. I kinda wish the camera could pull back a bit. I can feel a little directionless with seeing what's ahead of me, and I've seen some speedrunners do something similar with like zooming the camera out, but I couldn't figure out how to do it myself. This all kind of compounded in making navigation a little confusing to me. Like sure, what I said about the world was true, but maybe this also kind of helped with me getting lost in maps. A lot of the times I feel like I'm taking some real leaps of faith. The game knows how far I can go with my movement, but I don't think the camera got the memo. It's oddly claustrophobic. I feel like other isometric platformers would be a lot slower paced with the movement, in order to show both where I'm jumping from and where I'm going. Maybe I'm not that great at platformers of this camera angle, but I find being aware of my spatial position to be difficult at points. Like there's a circle that appears under Wayne, but usually by the time I see it I've already messed up the jump. I suppose one cool advantage that this game takes advantage of with its movement in 3D space is an abundance of secret areas. I can admit I barely found any, but it seems like there's a lot, with some actual real tangible rewards, like cool hidden equipment that can only be attained there. It's worth exploring, but something about it all just feels so uncomfortable and tiring to me. Like, all it takes is me flying around with my air dash and a map for a few seconds for me to start getting tired of all the possible ways to go. At points, player can find an arcade machine, leading to these 2D platforming segments. They kind of remind me of Modula Mulam, or Modula Mulam? Not sure. But it was this 2D platformer that Mason made for a game jam. I do like these segments that break the gameplay up. There's also one that's like a first-person maze dungeon crawling adventure that comes out of nowhere. That one was pretty cool. But in all honesty, these 2D sections are extremely rough. Like, the game's offering a god mode difficulty, and just the fact that a separate difficulty selection exists exclusive to these segments, I don't know. Maybe it kind of goes to show that there wasn't a lot of faith put into these segments. We have most of the same controls as in the overworld, but with the ability to fire chargeable shots and a double jump. I'm not sure how to describe it, other than that it really feels like a 2D game shoved into a 3D platformer. Maybe it's just the terrain and collision interactions with them, like how I can Skyrim climb up walls, praying and mashing double jump. Speaking of which, this one awkward section here with these moving platforms where suddenly my jump is really bad and I become sluggish, with my double jump just randomly not coming out. Mostly it doesn't come out, I just have to keep mashing until it comes out, and I need that to reach the next moving platform. Like, I don't know how this made it into the game, so that's kind of weird, but it's a pretty small part of the game, so it's whatever. What isn't a small part of the game, however, is the battle system. Much like the first game, this game is all on-screen encounters. I like how the game handles the potential issue of, is that an enemy or an NPC, that I have with some on-screen encounter games, by just making all enemies super red. And some of these gamers are out for blood. Like, I'm getting chased across the map like it's a horror game. Get away! I haven't mentioned this yet, but the player can perform a slap on the overworld, which looks goofy, but it has multiple purposes. Starting encounters with this will give an HP bonus, which I guess just means it recovers a bit of HP when going into the fight. It has a weird timing to it, basically just do it really early. Once again, we got HP and MP, known as Flesh and Will. Flesh is life, Will is used on skills, coolly known as gestures in this game. One of the biggest changes from Hylics 1 is the turn order. Instead of choosing everyone's actions and watching them play out, enemies and players' turns are mixed in between. I can't say this enough, but I appreciate all the animations and how the battle screen looks, especially seeing snippets of behind the scenes. There's care in an RPG's visuals when each individual item has an animation for it. This game shares the unique system of an afterlife. Having no XP, we must grind the meat of our enemies to increase the party's max health. I think that I didn't need to hoard the meat this time around until I got all the characters like in Hylics 1, because I think the bonus HP applies retroactively to unrecruited characters. I do think it's neat that the player gets Pangorma first and Samsnosa last. That's a little twist, considering most people in Hylics 1 got Samsnosa first and Pangorma last. The afterlife is a lot more accessible this time around, with a straight up perish command in battle to the returning teleporters, allowing us to fast travel around the world from the afterlife. While in game 1, it was only possible to teleport out of the afterlife, here there are teleporters to there, and I don't really know how I feel about all of this. It means that besides one story related death, it's possible to beat this game without dying, which I thought was kind of the purpose of Hylics 1. Like, I'm not the most educated on nauticism still. I know some of y'all wrote some comments explaining some things, but that was like 2 months ago, and that's a long time. My memory is like a cargo ship that gets full too quick and has to dump most of the valuables found on the journey before reaching the next port. But there was this sensible cycle of traveling between the physical and spiritual world via death, releasing the inner spark. The theme of inhabitants of this world feeding off each other, with us using the literal meat of our enemies to thrive, while also being killed by them. But this teleporting around easily feels a lot more gamey. Convenient, yes, but what was lost? Perhaps this game follows more in those names than I think. Trust me, I'm not that aware on Nauticism. Maybe this is shown as an evolution of Wayne and his friends to freely travel between the two worlds, accentuating the idea of being in this world, but not of this world. Hey, I'm supposed to be complaining about the battle system. What happened? Regardless, I found the fights in this game to be exhausting and incredibly unfun. Like, I spent the later half of the game just trying with all my life to avoid encounters. And here's why. Fights are such a slog in this game. Most encounters having a ton of enemies appearing to fight against. These go on for a while. This game only has 2 equipment slots on characters, which gave me some major flashbacks to another game I played that had the same concept. And I'm like, oh, okay, so people who defended the idea of 2 equipment slots must have been because of this game, Hylics 2. And no, not really. There are very few equipable items in general, and besides certain scenarios like the auto coffee, it's really just equip the one that increases the attack stat the most. I mean, Hylux 1 wasn't very interesting with its equipment, but it still had stuff like the dual wielding or sacrificing health for MP. This game does have interesting armor and weapons in hidden areas, but the only time they can be bought is near the end of the game, and by then I was checked the hell out. Characters in battle aren't very interesting either. Like, if you need a reminder of the pace this game appreciates, the most useful spell I used throughout the entire game was this one that does damage over time. So this game is just waiting for enemies to die from status effects. Characters all felt very similar for that reason. Every character gets one exclusive skill, with the rest being shared via televisions like in the original game. Wayne gets another damage over time skill, so I mean, you tell me. The Dozman gets a pretty useful defense skill that buffs an allies or party's max HP, making that basically all they do in fights. Samsnosa gets this weak as hell attack which targets all enemies, a true far cry from her draining skill in the first game. And it's pretty useless for reasons I'll get into in a bit. Pongorme gets this strong lightning skill, but it leaves him stunned, making its use pretty questionable. It's funny how Hylics 1 had all these overpowered skills and abilities, and they were pretty fun to mess around with. But in Hylics 2, I always felt so weak. There's a charge up skill the player gets access to that buffs all these exclusive commands in different ways, such as the Dozman's armor skill applying to all allies, but that needs setup, which just makes fights last even longer. Enemies are incredibly annoying. I commented on that one enemy in Hylics that would counter every time the player used like a non-skill attack, so the player could use its skills on it to not get counterattacked. Well, guess what? That enemy has nothing on the cast of hellfire this game puts you up against. We got enemies with unavoidable counter skills, leaving me bleeding or putting me to sleep, both in-game and real life, which is why Samsnosa's unique skill is awful. She attacks everyone and just gets blasted by like 50 different counters. This game values high damage single strikes. We got these these pool ligma enemies that split themselves, not even splitting their health like most games having enemies with that gimmick, it's just straight on copying itself. Fun. And then I attack them and I get counter-bled. Goody. Due to the lack of creative options like in Hylics 1, my power is being monitored at all times, at least that's how it felt. It reminded me of a ghostly rose in that way, alongside the way that every fight felt like a puzzle. But in the way that I have no idea what to do, and if I target the wrong enemy first, I'm done for. Like, shoot, you didn't choose to defeat this enemy first? Well, that's a shame, because now they're gonna full heal the enemy party. Do better next time, loser. These fights are beatable, but it gave that feeling where every encounter was like a boss fight. Incredibly high HP and damaging enemies that can wreck me, but I can win if I go all out. Going all out on every single fight is exhausting. Honestly, the boss fights felt easier than the enemy encounters. And I can't stress this enough, the music, the visuals, are also incredible in this game. But god dang, do these battle animations last a while. And maybe I wouldn't call this out if every battle wasn't like a 6v4. Like, yeah, I love these animations. They look cool. But after the first few fights, I'm already desensitized to them. I don't even acknowledge them anymore. They're already sent to the blank space in my mind while I wait for the action to finish. As I mentioned, with high HP and damaging enemies, this game is hard. This is the kind of game where using normal attacks is a death sentence. This is an MP game. If you aren't dumping all your MP with every character on every encounter, then buddy, you might need to play a different game because you aren't cut out for it. The previously mentioned slap skill outside of battles has another use. Bugs can be found around the world, and slapping them will refill a percentage of the party's flesh and will. Sadly, Snowsa doesn't get an increase to her power from bugs this time around, because according to her, she went a little too far last time, and you know, honestly, you kinda did. So basically, at the end of every fight, if I go forward and see another enemy, my best option is to turn the hell around and run back to find bugs to slap before proceeding. I thought at first this buggy system would improve the pace of the game, but what this resulted in is basically me going to the afterlife following every encounter to get a full heal, grind meat, and then teleport near to where I was. Cause sometimes there just weren't always bugs to slap. And here's the real kicker, my inventory was full of all sorts of healing items, mixed in with equipment and key items, which is great. But guess what? Guess, please guess, talk to me. I can't use items outside of battle. Why? No, seriously, why? Just let me complete a fight, open my menu, full heal, and move on. Pacing! This whole bug slapping phenomenon just feels like such an unnecessary extra step. What this all compounds into is a repetitive and exhausting battle system. Maybe this is the real reason I was sleeping every session. It's tiring. Choosing to enter a battle entails so much. Using all my flesh and will in a long ass fight of status effects and damage over time. Me dying on the inside as I watch the enemies use healing items. Then when the fight finishes, proceeding to run backwards to find bugs to slap, or taking a long ass trip to the afterlife. And these encounters can come one right after another. Play this game on easy mode. It's just too frustrating. I think this is the first time I've ever played a game where I had to lower the difficulty just because I thought it was so dull and I wanted not to be in the combat portion as much as possible. Say what you want about Hylics 1, but that game had a fast pace. I didn't want to finish this game. And when that happens with most games I play for this channel, I usually don't. I stop playing and I move on to the next video in line. It's rare that this happens, and the only reason I didn't drop this one here is because I kind of said I would look at this game anyways in the Hylics 1 video, and people wanted to hear my thoughts on it, but I don't know. Is this what people wanted to hear? It is arguably pretty interesting how hardcore this game chose to be. Despite the likely more casual, non-JRPG fan audience it is to attract from its visuals and music, and I think that's pretty neat. But golly, was this game miserable. But yet, people love this game. And I guess that's something I want to talk about. A certain loneliness and futility with game reviews. A sadness that I'll never be able to see or understand why so many people love these games and their characters. Wayne is like an RPG Maker icon, and I don't understand why. And now that I've finished the game, I sit and wonder in son why that is. So, I took a walk. I suppose the most obvious answer is that not every game is for everyone. I mean, this was likely the most expected outcome of me playing this game, considering my thoughts on Hylics 1. It made me consider the purposes of reviews and analysis on games. I honestly hate calling my videos reviews, but I guess they kinda are that. Reviews sound too official. I'm not a blanket to put over and define a game. I'm a small drink on the side to think about. Well, that shit made no sense. What I'm saying is that my thoughts are always my own, and not how the piece of media should be interpreted by everyone. But I don't know. If you know what I like, and you like what I like, well, maybe you won't like this game. I always think understanding the person talking about the game is important in interpreting how much value my opinions on the game hold personally to thyself. Maybe y'all are truly one of those people that I can't understand at all, who just say, "Yeah, this game is weird, druggy, trippy. I like taking a hit of that good stuff. Cool game." And that's why they like the game. Like, those people gotta be joking, right? This game and these characters mean things to people. People love this game. So does my unpopular opinions on this game have any merit or point of existence? I guess it all comes down to the fact that nothing has a point to existing. I think about this stuff maybe more than I should. But this video is kinda pointless, huh? But I guess everything is. Which means to the same extent, everything has a purpose. Okay, this is becoming filler. Maybe the best way of looking at this is that it's cool that games which challenge me, such as Hylics, exists. I'm upset that I can't join in on the Hylics 2 parties or agree with much of the game, but maybe that's what makes it dope. This game radiates an energy that feels beyond me, above me. And as I jam to some Snows' theme for the XTth time, I lay defeated, thinking only, I really wish I could have liked this game. This game is cool. Hylics 2 had a lot of love and hard work put into it. I can't deny that for a second, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, I don't think I'll ever be able to truly appreciate it, which upsets me. In some ways, I'll never understand Hylics 2, and that is kinda gamer sucky. I have to be honest with who I am and the kind of games that I like. That I personally would not recommend this game to others, as a reflections on my thoughts on the game. Yet at the same time, I feel like this game is so cool that I'd have to recommend it to everyone. Just put it on easy mode. This all goes to show how creative games can be in their existence. The people who make them, the people who play them, their splash on the world and the people who expel their thoughts on it. Even the ideas of gameplay. People can simply write this off as another turn-based JRPG, but I always look deeper than that. I don't like Hylics 2, but I think it's cool, and I'm glad it exists. So in that way, maybe I don't like it as a game, but as an existing entity. And maybe it's only with games as creative as Hylics that I can have these thoughts, which is my value that I have found in them. Which, I guess is a pretty good note to end on. Hylics 2 made me feel weird, and I wanted to talk about it for that reason. Looking back, I can barely remember what the game looks like. Yet at the same time, I wrote this review without watching any of the footage I recorded. It was almost like discussing a dream in a sense. But unlike a dream, this game is here, and everyone can see it. Chances are, y'all have already played the game. So I hope y'all who did love this game can understand why I don't. I just didn't get it. And that happens sometimes. But it was still nice to interact with an entity of creative existence. It's high time I ride out though. So, thanks for watching, peace out, and rock on. I would like to give a special shout out to the one and only Ken Chiago, my first ever Golly Gamer tier supporter. thanks for being an absolute legend, and I'm gonna keep on working, buddy. Which, hey, if anyone else wants to get my videos a week early, then check out my Ko-Fi. Love y'all, peace out.